Okay, there it looks like it's fucking working. Alright. I'm gonna have to fix some bullshit on that vertical thing, but I think it'll work. The fuck? Alright. Jesus Christ. All right, I think we're live now. I've been having some technical problems. Sorry about that, everybody. Sorry for starting late. I apologize. Sorry, just working on some technical stuff. I apologize for that. Anyway, we are live now. Welcome to the show. What the heck is happening in Utah politics? Stuart said yes. Stuart said, have you been having technical difficulties? Yes, I have been having technical difficulties, but we're all set. Just trying to work on a vertical outlay, and it's not seemingly working the way it's supposed to. So I apologize for that. Anywho, okay, let me see if I can get this all set up here. I want to look over here. Oh, I got to do that real quick. Sorry about that. Hang on. Got to do one thing. Get that to work over here. Well, I can't, so we'll just forget it today. I guess it's just not going to work today, so that's all right. I'm live on Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, but nowhere else. Anyway, I'm complaining, I'm frustrated, I'm angry, but let's talk about what happened in Utah politics today. I'm going to do this thing real fast, see if I can get that to work. Nope. Okay. It does not seem to want to work today like I would like it to. I'll have to figure that out tomorrow. It's not like I spent 6 hours trying to figure this out today. Anyway, let's get down to the show. I'm Brian Schott. This is what the heck is happening in Utah politics. And today we are going to talk about that redistricting hearing, because that was something, right? That was something, folks. I apologize for the way things are going to look on the Instagram tonight. I can't get the vertical output to work correctly. I will try to have that fixed by tomorrow. Anyway, the Tiger says streaming is so fraught with difficulties until you get it just right, and then you never want to touch it again. Exactly. Okay, let's talk about what happened today with that hearing on Utah's Capitol Hill about redistricting. It was the final hearing of the redistricting committee. And the 10-day public comment hearing starts, the 10-day public comment period starts tomorrow. So they'll have 10 days where you can comment on any map that is on the website. And that's important because any map that's on the website can be considered by the Utah legislature when they convene for a special session a little bit later, in October. So that's what they can consider any map that is on that website. So get your comments in at that point before that time, because anything that's on that website, any map, even a map from the public, can be considered by the Utah legislature when they get into the special session. Okay, so let's talk about what happened at that committee hearing. I sent out an email. I sent out a story a little bit earlier this evening with my take on it. And, a lot of people are going to talk about what the maps look like. I already told you what the maps look like. I told you that on Sunday after they released them. I told you what the partisan breakdown, what it would look like if they had been in effect for previous elections, just how fair those maps are. Some people will probably want to talk about the bill from Senator Brady Brammer and that bill that attempts to cook the books, and we can talk more about that. We've talked about that pretty much every session that we've had so far. I'm happy to answer your questions about that. But let's talk about the hearing itself, because it did not go well for the two Democrats on the hearing, but it also points out the dynamic that the Democrats are dealing with on the Hill. On Monday, the Republican majority had already released their maps, and they brought in a gentleman by the name of Dr. Sean Trenda. And Dr. Sean Trenda, or Trendy, however you want to pronounce his name, he is the chief elections analyst for Real Clear Politics, if you know that name. He's also become the go-to person for redistricting among Republicans. That's what that's his expertise. And he helped them draw the 5 maps that they put out on Sunday. And I can bring those maps up in a little bit. We'll discuss that. But he helped draw those maps, and then he testified on Monday. It was pretty bland testimony. There was one moment when Representative Doug Owens, one of the two Democrats on the committee, tried to ask him about the partisan performance of those maps, what those maps would do in the real world. And that was shut down pretty quickly by Senator Scott Sandell, who, as we've said before, has been taking great pains to crack down on anything that even slightly looks like it could be partisan or political data. And the reason he's doing that is because, according to the rules of Prop 4, when you draw the maps, you cannot consider any of that. You can't consider any political data when you're drawing the maps. And so Senator Sandell decided to overly comply with these maps, overly comply with the rules when drawing the maps. And he cracked down on that. And that's important. We'll get to that in a second. So then today, the committee gets underway. They briefly talk about the 5 maps that were put forward by the commission or by the Republicans. I'm still a little scattered from my technical difficulties. I will pull it together, I promise. So they briefly talk about the 5 maps that the Republicans put out on Sunday. And everybody talks about what they like about the maps and what they don't like about the maps and which maps they favor. And again, it was all pretty run-of-the-mill, pretty humdrum, pretty boring. And then the two Democrats on the committee, Senator Luz Escamilla and Representative Doug Owens, present their map proposal. And the Republicans kind of had to, part of the problem was they didn't submit their map in time to make the 24-hour notice. It was not ready 24 hours before the committee hearing. But the Republicans gave them a little leeway. And that was partially because there was a little bit of a back and forth. You have to read between the lines. It happened throughout the hearing. That the person, Dr. Trendy, that the legislature hired to assist with these maps, he really didn't help the Democrats. He was not available for the Democrats. In fact, if you go back to the Monday hearing, when they say that he was hired by the legislature to help draw the maps, when the Republicans talk about his expertise and how he was hired, how he was retained by the legislature to help draw the maps, it sure seems like Senator Escamilla was either caught by surprise that he was hired, or that he was, or that she was trying to make a point that he was hired for the Republican majority. And then today, she points out that their map was a little bit late because they didn't get any help drawing it from Dr. Trende. They had to go out and hire their own expert, which was Dr. Daniel Magleby from SUNY Binghamton. And I believe he is the son of the legendary political scientist Dr. Dave Magleby from BYU, one of my favorite people ever. And you talk to any political journalist in the state, they loved Dr. Magleby. Dave Jones was another one. He was fantastic, rest his soul. But I believe he's the son of Dave Magleby from BYU. And so they had to go out and get their own expert. They had to go out and get their own expert to help them draw the maps, because Dr. Trende, who was hired by the legislature, pretty much gave most of his time to the Republicans. And there was a moment, so the Democrats introduced their map, and then they introduced Dr. Magleby as their expert to talk about it. And he starts talking about looking at the maps produced by Dr. Trende. It was kind of hot academic on academic action today up at the legislature, to coin a term. That makes me laugh. I hope it makes you laugh too, because that's funny. Anyway, at one point when Dr. Magleby was talking about the maps produced by Dr. Trende, he said, he said he had been trying to get access to the data behind the maps. He wanted to look at the data behind the maps. He wanted to evaluate the data behind the maps. And they had asked and they had asked and they asked, and it was not provided to them. It was finally made public right before the committee hearing started. So two members of the committee, the Democrats, had been asking for this data. They couldn't get their hands on it. They finally got their hands on it when it was made public. Not when it was, not when they asked. They had to wait for everybody else to get their hands on it. And as he was talking about that, Magleby said, and I'm going to quote here, he said, there are several questions about he's talking about Dr. Trende here. There are several questions about how he's applied that methodology and what's missing from the analysis he's conducted, or at least reported here. Okay? He said he's having trouble figuring out the methodology that Dr. Trende used to draw these maps, what data he used to draw these maps. And then Representative Owens steps in and he says, we've got a hunch that there was some political data used, that these maps were drawn using political data. His quote was, we strongly suspect there was a data set incorporated into the test that Dr. Trende applied, and we are unable to verify. It's as if we're told to buy a car and we can't lift the hood and look. And at that point, Senator Sandel, who has been overly complying with the rules, no political data, no politics at all, cracking down on anybody talking about that, he exploded. He jumped Owens. He jumps in and says, Representative, you just demeaned us. You demeaned us to the audience. You called us somehow hiding or lying about everything that we presented to say that our maps were not developed with any political data. You just misrepresented that, and that's out of order. He was hot. Owens replies, may I qualify and clarify, Senator? That's not my intention. We have a suspicion that may have been done. Sandel says, you didn't say you had a suspicion. You called us out. And Owen says, we strongly suspect that's been done. I don't think there's knowledge on the part of any committee member. I think there's been a formulation of a test that looks like it's mathematically, specifically representative. And what he means there is they've got a hunch. They think and that's why they wanted the data. They think that there was a formula used, there was data used to make sure it was mathematically, specifically representative. What does that mean? Well, maybe it was mathematically engineered to make sure that there's a Republican majority, to make sure that Republican voters. Now, you can't use that, and that's part of the reason why Sandel absolutely exploded on him. Before that could go any further, the House Chair, Representative Candace Perucci, jumped in, tried to calm things down, and we'll get to what happened in a second, but there's a couple of questions in the chat that I want to get to. JourneyGirl67 on Instagram says, why are they hiring separate experts? Why aren't they working on it together, which is in the spirit of Prop 4? Welcome to the Utah legislature. The Republicans control everything. And it wasn't the Republicans who hired Dr. Trenda as their expert. It was the Office of Legislative Counsel. OLRGC, Office of Legislative Research and General Counsel. They retained him. But he's a Republican expert. And at one point, I thought that Escamillo really put a fine point on that. Because she was pointing out that Trenda, who was hired as an expert by the legislature, is typically associated with the Republicans. She says, we're supposed to work as a legislature in a nonpartisan way for this process. She said, Dr. Trenda looks to me very suspicious, like Dr. Magleby looks for you, but they are experts in their areas. They're just, one is a Republican expert, one is a Democratic expert. And the Democrats had to go and hire their own expert on this. So that's the first little blow up. The second thing that I thought was not great for the Democratic Party or for the Democrats on the committee, like it was really bad. Nathan Detroit says, and Sandel said, how dare you, sir? Essentially, yeah, that's what he said. A lot of pearl clutching at that point. But back to what happened at this hearing. It was not good for the Democrats because Representative Representative Cal Roberts, brand new to the legislature, he's a freshman. He dug up some old Twitter posts from Dr. Magleby that just did not look good. Did not look good for them at all. First one he pulled up was from 2021. And he was replying to, the internet is written in ink. It lives forever. There's always a tweet, right? And he pulled up a Twitter post from Dr. Magleby from 2021 where he was responding to a local reporter who had made a post about Governor Cox not vetoing the congressional maps when they were first approved in 2021. And Dr. Magleby posted, and I've got a screenshot of it on the website. He says this is straight out of the authoritarian playbook. Step 1, rig the system to systematically exclude the opposition. Step 2, gaslight the opposition and say they are free to compete in the rigged system you set up. Shameful. And when Representative Roberts brought that out, it was over. It immediately put Dr. Magleby on the deep defensive. And it also ensured that none of the Republicans on the committee were going to listen to what he had to say. I think there's also zero chance that this map that the Democrats put out, which I'll bring up in a second, it's not going to get any serious consideration when the legislature, when the legislature gets in a special session in October. But Representative Roberts, he reads out this tweet. And he says, Dr. Magleby, you've used the word bias a lot, and I want to talk to you today about bias, and it's important because we know that a bias source will yield a bias map. And then he asked Dr. Magleby, do you believe the Utah legislature is authoritarian. Now Magleby, caught off guard, immediately on the defensive, immediately on his heels, he says, at first he said he didn't remember the tweet. It was 5 years ago. But then he says, no, he did not believe they were authoritarian. And his quote, I thought it was pretty good. It took him a second to gather himself, but he said, I have high hopes she will do well by the people of Utah, giving them a map that represents their interests in Washington. But that wasn't the end of it, because Roberts pulls up another tweet from 2020, October 1st, 2020. And this is a deleted tweet, so I don't know what he was referencing. But what he wrote was, the system is already rigged in favor of Republicans. Democrats can make things a little better if they had Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico as states. Then Roberts says, I have to say the people of Utah are going to ask, and the media should ask, if it's your intent to use this map to rig the system in favor of Democrats. That's not my intention with this map. I have no intention of rigging the system, is what Magleby responded. But at that point, really any serious consideration of the map was done at that point. They finally got around to asking some questions about it. And if you remember the map, we showed it last night. It basically builds it does two maps around the population cores of Utah County and Salt Lake County. But then it's got a gigantic district encompassing all of southern Utah, and then it's got another gigantic district encompassing the rest of northern Utah. And this map has so many problems. It doesn't meet the criteria for compactness. If you look at that map, if you look at the map and it has all of southern Utah in one congressional district, it's massive. It's a massive, massive district. You're not going to meet the compactness requirement. It also creates a district that would have gone for Kamala Harris in 2024 by 23 points. And I don't think that that's going to meet the fairness standard under the bill from Senator Brady Brammer. That seems to be the metric by which we're going to start evaluating these things. Because instead of mirroring the electoral performance of the state as a whole, which seems to be the goal of that bill, this one creates an overwhelmingly Democratic district. So I don't see how this bill or this map passes any muster. And then we got the public hearings. The public comment. A lot of the usual suspects from who are Republican supporters got up. You got Marianne Christensen. She's got a fake organization called Utah Political Watch. No, actually hers is Utah Legislative Watch. I'm Utah Political Watch. She's Utah Legislative Watch. And that organization is basically her. That's it. Their website, if you go over to their website, it's been coming soon for several years. They have a Facebook page. Basically, she's an offshoot of the Utah Eagle Forum. She used to be Gail Ruzicka's right-hand person. So when you see her talk, it's another Utah Eagle Forum person. Then we had another person who was Utah Eagle Forum, and it was a very funny exchange where someone said, I register as a Republican, even though I'm a Democrat, because that's the only way I can feel like I'm represented in this state. And Delane England, who was representing the Eagle Forum, she did not like that at all. She called it morally wrong. It is morally wrong for people to join a political party if they're not true believers, apparently. They're lying about it. Unfortunately, there's no law saying that you can't do that. The Republicans have changed the requirements. If you want to vote in the next election, you're going to have to change. If you're a Democrat or an independent and you want to vote in the Republican primary in 2026, I think the deadline is coming up in January sometime. You have to do it extremely early. They're making it as difficult as possible, but they can't stop people from doing that. And she's really offended by that. It's morally wrong. It's against moral law. Anyway, so that's where we're at right now. That was the final hearing of the redistricting committee. They had 2 hearings, produced 5 maps. Now we enter the 10-day public comment period. People can leave comments online. I don't think they're going to have any hearings about it. This was the chance to talk to them in person. 10-day public comment hearing. And then in October 6th is when they have to vote and present their map to the court. At the same time, you're going to get the plaintiffs are going to be able to present their map. I've gotten a lot of questions from people saying, why can't they use the maps from the 2021 Independent Redistricting Commission? And I finally got some clarification on that. The reason they can't use those maps is because those maps were not done under Prop 4. They were not, even though they followed the rules of Prop 4, they were operating under SB 200, which was the bill that repealed Prop 4. And so they can't use those maps. I'm sure they could just take them and tweak them a little bit. But as the maps stood, they were created under SB 200, which was the bill that repealed Prop 4. And so they would be illegal. They would not count under this, under the rules of Prop 4. So that's why they cannot just grab those maps and use them. And also the judge said the legislature is not required to consider them. They're not required to take a vote on them. Stewart on YouTube talking about what happened with Representative Roberts. He says that was dirty. Well, yeah. But you kind of have to expect that sort of thing. I mean, I've seen some of these posts from Dr. Magleby, and I'm guilty of, everybody's guilty of hot takes. And sometimes but I'm not surprised that they went digging to try to discredit a witness. Nathan Detroit says, I'm guessing he enlisted keyboard warrior Trevor Lee to dig up the worst of Magleby's tweets. Oh, I'm sure that maybe. I've got about 5 people that I would think of who would do it before they would turn Trevor Lee loose on that. I'm not going to name names, but there's about 5 people come to mind before that. So that's where we are. We are now in the 10-day period where everybody gets to comment on the maps. And this is important. And someone on the Utah Political Watch Discord pointed this out. Stewart, I appreciate him for doing this. And he was right. I was wrong when I was looking at it. I thought that the committee had to put forward a map, and they purposely did not. So that means any map from the committee, from the Democrats, or from the public that is published to the redistricting website before tomorrow, before Thursday, can be considered by the legislature when they get into session to vote on a map. Any of those maps can pop up. They're not going to be able to spring something at the last second, but if a map is on that website and it was published before the 25th, it can be considered because it will be before the public comment period. And you can see those maps by going to redistricting.utah.gov. There's a link that says view and comment on maps. So that's where we are. What are your questions? What do you think? What are your thoughts? Let's have a discussion about this. What do you think the final map is going to look like? I mean, if you look at the maps that the Republicans put out, all 5 of those, they're kind of reasonable. I mean, they would create what appear to be competitive districts when you put past election data in them. They appear to be competitive in at least one district, maybe 2. On a couple of the maps in the 2024 election, Trump would have carried a district by 10 points or less, which feels like it might be competitive. Now, you obviously have to look at candidate quality. You have to factor in turnout. 2026 is going to be lower turnout because it's a midterm election. We're not going to have the same turnout we did in 2024. Lower turnout elections tend to favor Republicans. So you have to factor all of that in. It's not guaranteed that even though a district looks competitive, that it's going to be competitive. There's a lot of factors that go into it. But from all the way it looks, all intents and purposes, it looks like we might have some competitive districts depending on if they pick one of those maps. I put it in my newsletter this morning, and I'm going to see if I can make this work. It's probably not going to show correctly on the vertical stream on Instagram, and I apologize for that. Let me see if it works right here. I know that you can see it over here on the horizontal. If you want to see the full screen, go to YouTube, go to, unfortunately we're not going to be able to see that on Instagram. Let me see if I can futz with this a little bit. I can move this over just a little bit here and it'll help. Maybe I'll make it a little smaller and bring it in here. Producing on the fly by myself. Gotta love that, people. It's fantastic. It's awesome. Okay. So you're going to get a look at this. This is a map that popped up on the late last night by someone named Andrew Dugan in Texas. And if a little bit of sleuthing shows that the same guy may have drawn some maps that were very favorable to Republicans. Very favorable to Republicans in Texas's redistricting. His maps did not get picked, but if it's the same guy, he already drew those. But if you look at this map proposal from Andrew Dugan, take a look at this. And it's kind of hard to zoom in on it, but there's one district, District 4, and on the county breakdown, that is centered on the southern half of Salt Lake County and Alpine and Highland. Then if you look at District 2, that's Salt Lake City, East Bench, a little bit of North Salt Lake, and it sweeps all the way out to Tooele and down to St. George. Now look at this and tell me it's not a gerrymander. I mean, just from the eye test, it looks like a gerrymander. I mean, why would you give Southern Salt Lake County its own district and then connect Salt Lake City with St. George? Well, I can tell you why you would do it. You would do it to make sure that Democrats can't win, to blunt the Democratic stronghold of Salt Lake City with the overwhelming Republican advantage in southern Utah. That's why you would do it. But this map is published on the website, so it is in play when the legislature meets on to vote on October 6th. Since this map here, this crazy looking map, which connects Salt Lake City with St. George, Washington County, it is fair game for lawmakers to consider because it is published on the website before the 10-day comment period starts. Nathan Detroit says District 4 is the half of Salt Lake County that doesn't want to be Salt Lake County. Exactly. That's it, 100%. Well, you guys over on Instagram are very quiet tonight. Haven't seen any Utah lawmakers show up either. Nathan also says, tough to predict this far out, but given the way national news is going, I think we'll have 2018 turnout as opposed to 2022. Maybe. I mean, again, it's hard to see. I mean, if you look at the indicators that we're seeing, it sure looks like, the Democratic enthusiasm is much higher right now. But who knows? I mean, the 2026 midterms are a long ways away. We will get an indicator when Virginia votes next year. That's usually a bellwether. That's usually the thing that tells us what might happen. If you have not seen, I'm going to pull up the Escamilla Owens map here for you. Everybody get a chance to look at that one. This one creates population districts around Salt Lake County, Utah County. But if you look at this massive District 2 at the southern part of the state, there's no way that meets the... There is absolutely no way that meets the requirement for compactness. Maria on YouTube says, can anyone, even with no Utah ties, create maps? Yeah, anybody can. Anybody can propose a map. One of our subscribers to Utah Political Watch, who's very active in our Discord, again, it's Stuart. I don't know how many maps you've done, Stuart, but I think it's like 20. You had a very lively back and forth with Senator Sandel too, and he watched the video that you put together, where you showed really quick how to make how to make a gerrymandered map. In fact, you have labeled some of your maps that you've uploaded to the website as obvious gerrymander, which I think is hilarious. But this is kind of like Stewart's Super Bowl, and I'm not saying that with a mocking tone. I'm saying that this is apparently one of Stewart's things, and I appreciate the work he's doing. He's been very helpful with some of my coverage of this. Dank on YouTube says, remind me what kind of influence citizens can have on the map decision. Just public comment period and contact our reps, basically. Yeah, that's where we are right now. You can literally leave comments on the maps on the website. Like, you can literally tag part of the map and then leave a comment there. Now, if you talk about anything political, if your comment says anything political, if your comment says anything about partisan data, political data, this favors Democrats, this favored Republicans, it's going to get 86th. They're never going to see it. They made it 100% clear that those kind of comments, they're not going to accept those. So be careful. Talk about things like compactness. Talk about things like keeping communities of interest together. Talk about things like ease of transportation. That's what you have to make your comments about. If you start talking about, this is all for the Republicans and you're just trying to help Republicans, they're never going to see that, because the staff has been instructed to 86 those comments. So if you want to leave comments, and the website is redistricting.utah.gov, focus them on anything but partisan politics, because they're not going to look at those. They're never going to see them. They've been instructed to filter those out. Melissa on YouTube, what are your thoughts on mixing urban and rural areas? Well, I find it odd, but they've been saying this for years. I went back and looked at some of the coverage from redistricting in 2011, redistricting in 2001, when Utah only had 3 congressional districts. And at that time, we had a Democrat in Congress, Jim Matheson. And he represented the 3rd congressional district, which covered almost the entire eastern half of the state and part of Salt Lake City. And that district was drawn in 2001 specifically to knock him out of office. They started talking about the rural-urban mix then. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to get rid of Jim Matheson. It didn't work, but he had a district that was larger than the state of Alabama. It had covered more area than the state of Alabama. I remember looking that up and just being absolutely gobsmacked when I saw that. So they've been talking about this since 2001. 2011, we got the 4 districts. And as I've said before, they accidentally they tried to gerrymander Matheson out of office again. They drew the 2nd congressional district in such a way that there was no way that he could win it. But what they did accidentally is they created a competitive district in the 4th, the brand new 4th district, which, if you believe some of the scuttlebutt at the time, they were specifically trying to draw that to favor then Representative Carl Wimmer. He was ready to run for Congress. He was going to run for Congress. He was gearing up, and a lot of people thought that they drew that map specifically for him. But then Mia Love waltzes in and wins the nomination, but loses to Jim Matheson. And Matheson, he was in the 2nd congressional district. They drew the map to get him out of that seat, which they did. He just jumped into the 4th and won. Barely, but he won. He decided not to run again. He decided not to run 2 years later. Mia Love defeats Doug Owens, actually. 2 years later that, she defeats Doug Owens again. Then she loses to Ben McAdams, another Democrat. Barely. And then McAdams barely loses to Burgess Owens in 2020. But they accidentally created that competitive district in 2011, and then when they redistricted again in 2021, they were bound and determined that they were not going to repeat that mistake at all. That was not going to happen. So they've been talking about mixing urban and rural areas all the way for 20 years, 24 years now. They did it back in 2001 when they were trying to get rid of Jim Matheson. Well, I mean, that's what happened today in politics. Is there anything that anybody else wants to talk about? The chat is open for you. Give me your questions. Give me your comments. Want to know what you're thinking about these maps? What do you think that lawmakers are going to do? Do you think they're going to pick one of the 5 maps that they put forward? Or do you think they're going to pull a wild card? Do something completely off the rails? We haven't even talked about the bill from Senator Brady Brammer yet, which we've talked about the last couple of nights, and I hope that I've explained that sufficiently. The committee did not take any action on that bill today, and they don't have to. It's had its hearing. They discussed it on Monday. So when they meet in a special session, that bill can be added to the agenda. It's already had its hearing, and then they can just ram it through in both the House and the Senate. Dank says, no questions, really. The partisanship of our legislature sucks. Without making an editorial comment on that, I mean, this is what happens when you get a supermajority. And they have the trifecta. I mean, and it's probably not going to change anytime soon. Just because Utah is a Republican state. You've heard the stats. Republicans outnumber Democrats. They said 3-1. It's actually almost 4-1 if you look at active voters. I think voters not affiliated with either party outnumbered Democrats by almost 2.5-1, maybe close to 3-1. Last time I looked that up. Overall, in terms of active voters, people who have voted within the last 2 elections, They make up 13. Democrats make up 13% of the state. Republicans only make up 50%, little over 50. And I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I think that the independents are right around 35, maybe, yeah, be around 35%. And then the rest is between all the third parties, Constitution, Forward Party, American Independent Party, and so on and so forth. What is funny to me as we talk about this, as we talk about party registration, what is really funny to me is that the next time you're watching a committee hearing and it has something to do with elections, a gentleman, and his name is escaping me right now, but he shows up, and he is the chairman of the Utah American Independent Party, and he always says, we are the third largest political party in the state. But my theory is that he has so many people who have registered as American independent parties because they think they were registering as independents. They didn't understand that they didn't want to be, that independent means not affiliating with any party. They just saw American independent and they think, oh, I want to be independent. And that's why they registered. And I always find that funny because he doesn't ever get any pushback on it. But there's no way that he claims he's got like 85,000 people in the party. And I'll have to look up the most recent numbers. I'll have them for you the next time that we do this. But there's no way that is true. The Mad Bluebird on Instagram says, I heard it mentioned that a map can't be considered if partisan data was used. How would they verify that with a map submitted by a random citizen? That's a good question. I don't know how they do that. Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know how they would do that. That's really good. I will look that up. I'm going to make myself a note about that, and I will look that up to see how they would look at it, because they're very, very strict about no political data being used. Also, they think that if you use the website Dave's Redistricting, you're automatically using political data, and that's not true at all. That's not true at all. You can turn that off as you're drawing this. That's a good question. Appreciate that. Nathan Detroit says American Independent is the Birchers, right? No, the Birchers are a lot of the Republican base. You look at what Mike Lee talks about. I mean, a lot of his positions are offshoots of the Birchers. In fact, that pocket constitution that he waves around, it's by a group that used to be the Birchers. It was published by a group that used to be the Birchers, has strong ties to the Birchers. There's a lot of Bircher DNA in that. Maria on YouTube says, is redistricting the only issue to be addressed in the special session? No, they're going to have a number of bills. There's going to be a number of stuff. And I'll have to get a list. They had hearings for them during they had hearings for a lot of these bills during the interim last month in September, because they were expecting to have a special session, last month in August, because they were expecting to have a special session in September, but then the judge's ruling throwing out the congressional maps changed that, and they didn't want to come into a special session and then have a redistricting session. So they just moved everything to October. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be on that list. And most of the time, special sessions are for passing bills that need urgent fixes, need to fix things that they did during the session earlier this year, and they inadvertently created a problem. That's what they usually use these things for. But when you have a super majority, they can use it to ram through legislation that they want to bypass the normal legislative process. I've written about this before. Representative Carrie Ann Lisenby is making a lot of noise about legislation to require proof of citizenship to register to vote. And she has been running around making these claims that she has proof that a whistleblower hath come forward with proof that non-citizens are registered to vote and actually have been voting in Utah elections. But when you ask her to show you, she says she can't, or she won't. And it's not just me. She ignores me. But clerks, I mean, I did a grammar request to figure out what those communications were. And the Davis County clerk was literally asking her, hey, can you share that information with us? Because we'd really like to know if there's a non-citizen on the voter rolls so we can fix that. And she won't share it. But she wants to get this legislation that didn't pass during the regular session added to the special session. Why? Because she wanted to bypass the regular legislative process. So keep your eye on that, because it's one day. It's basically an afternoon. Very little debate. They know it's going to pass, and so they just pass it. And it's a way to get around it. The Mad Bluebird asks, if the legislature passes their new bill regarding partisan bias, would they be able to introduce a new map without the 10-day comment period? No. Not under the schedule that was been agreed to by both sides in this. When the judge issued the scheduling order to come up with these remedial maps, that is the schedule. And maps have to be published on the website by today. If they're published after that, they can't be considered. So, and that's really not even the purpose of the Brammer legislation to create this standard for partisan symmetry. I think the purpose is, and if you look at the way it's written, it looks like the purpose is to tie the hands of the judge so she has to accept whatever map they come up with so long as it fits into that. So no. Nathan Detroit just says, the Utah Party is the Independent American Party. Yeah, so that makes much more sense. The American Independent Party was a George Wallace ticket, which, when you think about it, probably not a lot of difference between the two groups. But the Independent American Party, third largest party in Utah, and I think it's just because a lot of people think they're becoming independent. I'm an independent American. Yes, I do not want to belong to any party. I'm an American and I am independent, so I will mark myself as an independent American. That always makes me laugh. Well, unless somebody is using a burner, unless they use their learn their lesson and are using a burner now, I do not see any member of the Utah legislature joining our little chat tonight, breaking our streak at 2. Dank talking about the partisanship of the legislature, even just regarding internal cooperation between legislators, it seems really unfortunate. The biggest thing that could happen in Utah is if the supermajority is broken in either house. Because what that would do is that would immediately have a moderating effect on a lot of legislation. Because a veto threat then has some weight. You can't just automatically, there's a lot of legislation that Governor Cox has said he doesn't like, but he won't veto it because he knows he's going to get overridden, and it just wastes everybody's time. And now you can make a point. I suppose if you wanted to be stubborn, you could make a point and just veto and then force the legislature to come back into session. But, that gets expensive because we have to pay for it as taxpayers. And it's just going to be overridden anyway. So I guess it's pragmatic, and I guess Cox doesn't want to pick that fight. Got to pick your battles, but if the supermajority in either house were broken, that would change a lot about Utah politics. It would immediately become much more moderate. They would have to moderate themselves because a veto threat would carry some weight to it. Last comment of the evening. Nathan Detroit. Cox is extremely deferential to the ledge. What are they going to do when someone like Lyman gets in and actually has their own opinion? Well, that will be an interesting thing if that ever happens. That will be extremely interesting if that ever happens. I don't know if it will. I think the 2028 gubernatorial race is going to be extremely interesting. And I think that, well, let's look at it this way. Lyman is popular among a certain segment of the Republican Party. But if the signature route still exists in 2028, it's not, he can't win he can't win a primary. He can't. He just can't. He will not win a Republican primary if the signature route still exists. And I don't know if that's going to be, I mean, there are people who are eyeing runs for the for the governor's mansion who would benefit with much more than Lyman without the signature path in place. I mean, it's the worst kept secret in the state that Speaker Mike Schultz is very serious about running for governor in 2028. I think his problem is nobody knows who he is. I mean, the name recognition is terrible. As I've said repeatedly, the Utah political landscape is littered with the remains of Utah House speakers who thought that would get them the next level. Brad Wilson thought he could just ride that into the U.S. Senate, and look where it got him. He spent $6 million to finish, third in that primary? Maybe fourth? I can't remember. I'll have to look that up. Didn't get him anywhere. I mean, Schultz will have money to run, but he doesn't have a lot of the name recognition. And you see a lot of his moves on social media. It's clear he's trying to launch a charm offensive, trying to get his name out there. But it just doesn't work for legislators. As someone said to me, the titles that they have in the legislature are very important to the people in that building, but you get 3 blocks away and nobody knows who you are, and then they don't care. I'll tell you right now who the two people, as we sit, there are 2 people who are probably best positioned to run for governor just based on name recognition alone. I'll give you a second to put it in the chat. Who do you think I'm thinking of? There are 2 people, 2 Republicans, who I think are in a really good position as we talk right now to run for governor in 2028 based on name recognition alone. Does anybody have any guesses? Wish I could play the Jeopardy theme here, but I don't want to violate copyrights. Nathan Detroit says Romney. No. No. Here are the names. Former Congressman Jason Chaffetz. Lieutenant Governor Deidre Henderson. Those are the 2 people who I think are best positioned right now. They are in a, I don't think people understand what a strong position they are simply by name recognition. And Chaffetz he's moving pieces into place to run. I don't know if Henderson wants to run. I don't know if she has the appetite, but just based on the fact that she is the lieutenant governor, she is in a stronger position than the Speaker of the House. She is in a much stronger position right now. And Chaffetz is in a hell of a position. He's going to be able to raise money real fast. And as I reported a couple of months ago, he took all the money from his federal account, his federal leadership PAC, and moved it to the state. Because you can do that. You can move federal money into a state campaign. You can't move state money into a federal campaign, but you can move federal money into a state campaign. And Chaffetz has done that. And he's been lining up some big donors. He's a best-selling author. He's written I think 3 books that have been on the New York Times bestseller list. His podcast, love him or hate him, it's a good podcast. I like it. He gets some great guests. He's got a big audience. Agree, disagree with his politics. Just look at the position. Jason Chaffetz is probably right now the strongest contender. Just based on name recognition alone. And he's out there. I mean, he's on Fox News. He hosts Fox News. The Republican base is going to know him. They're going to trust him because of what he says on Fox News. Nathan Detroit said Chaffetz makes sense. Henderson would need the signature route. The delegates hate her for following election law. Right. Exactly. If the signature route is there, that's her path. But I think Chaffetz would have to take it too. I think everybody should take it. They want to get rid of it. But if it's there, it is complete campaign malpractice to not take it. You know? Because if you don't, you get knocked out at convention. Just ask Steve Handy. That's why we have Trevor Lee. Steve Handy did not collect signatures, and Trevor Lee needed something like 30 votes at convention to knock him out of the race. And now he's in the legislature. Great job, caucus and convention system. Anyway, I think we're going to leave it on that for this evening. Thank you so much for joining. If you have not yet, subscribe to my newsletter at utahpoliticalwatch.news. It's free. Follow me on social media. That's also free. If you want to support what I do, you can become a paying subscriber. It's $5 a month, or make a one-time donation at my website, utahpoliticalwatch.news. That allows me to do what I do. I don't have a billionaire backer who's, paying for all this. I'm not taking shady Russian money like Mike Lee's best friend, Benny Johnson. I'm not taking that, right? I'm raising money little by little, bit by bit, shoestringing this whole operation. What you see is what you get. It's me. If you like what I do, if you want to support it, go make a donation or become a paying subscriber. Every little bit helps, and I would appreciate it. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. Thanks so much for joining the stream tonight. I don't think that we're going to do this tomorrow. I think I'm going to take the night off tomorrow because there's not a lot going on. Oh, Nathan Detroit says you have a newsletter. Nathan's one of my subscribers. He's part of the Discord. I get the winky face. Anyway, we'll be off tomorrow. Maybe we'll do something Friday. If we're going to do it, I'll send out a blast and I'll put it on my social media. In the meantime, if there's something you want to have me talk about on this, if there's a topic you'd like me to bring up, something you'd like me to explain, drop me an email, send me a message on social media. I got a great email last night. Somebody wants to talk about education funding. Yeah, let's talk about that because it's really important to understand how that works here in Utah. So we'll do that down the line. Hope everybody has a great night. Thank you so much for joining the stream. Thank you so much for your support. I'm enjoying doing this.